Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Living with Parkinson's meetup. I'm Chris Kruger, Program Manager for Educational Content with the Davis Phinney Foundation. And like our panelists, I also live with Parkinson's. I was diagnosed in 2020 when I was 37. So last month, our topic was non-motor symptoms, but we only focused on a couple. And so today, we're going to talk about non-motor symptoms again. And before we get there, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. And panelists, when you do this, how about you just share the first non-motor symptom that you experienced, if you have, and maybe not everyone has, but for me, it was I lost my sense of smell. It was a very disorienting thing then, and it's a disorienting thing now. I also want to say that I'm going to throw a poll up on the screen. So, and please be gracious to me if I don't do this well, because I've never actually done this, but I've produced a poll that will allow just to allow us to see some of the non-motor symptoms that you experience in the audience, and also maybe the one you'd most like us to discuss. So if you're willing to participate in that, please do. You don't have to, though. So and bear in mind, we'll also not share these with anyone outside. You know, your information will be private and anonymous. So I'll throw that poll up, and then I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves. And why don't I'll throw this poll up, and as I do that, I'll ask maybe Kat to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Kat Hill. I'm in Estacada, Oregon. And let's see, I was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's at the age of 48 in 2015. And I'm really happy to be here today. And probably my first non-motor symptom was anxiety that I experienced.
Yeah, maybe I would say that too, now that I think of it. It's hard to track these things sometimes.
It is. Yeah, I don't
Robin.
have a PD calendar that I keep.
Yeah, especially not before you knew you had it.
Right, right.
So, Robin.
Sure. Robin Morides out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Once I understood the full constellation of symptoms, I've had symptoms since my early 30s, since the early 2000s. And I would say that my first non-motor symptom was hormonal imbalance that led to a cascade of other symptoms.
Yeah.
Sleep disturbance, anxiety, so much our hormone system goes haywire and everything goes haywire.
Yeah, that's another really difficult thing to tease out, is how do you decide which is, when one thing is on its own and when they're connected. Sleep and cognition is one other thing that I experience that's like that for me now. Like, my sleep issues affect my cognition. Okay, Larry.
Yeah, hi everybody. Good to see everybody again. And I'm still in Toronto, and from a hot, humid Toronto. I've been living with Parkinson's for about 12 years, and my non-motor symptom was anxiety in the first couple of years after my diagnosis. Went through the roof, to the point of having panic attacks on the commute into the office in the morning to get into a taxi to come home, because I was overwhelmed. So that was my non-motor symptom. And it's a very important topic today, because, it's the invisibility. Some of these symptoms are the invisibility symptoms that we've got to deal with as we deal with our physical symptoms. So great topic to talk about.
All right. Thanks, Larry. And Brian.
There we go. Hi, I'm Brian Reedy. I'm in Carson City, Nevada. I finally moved back home. And I've had Parkinson's for at least 14 years now. And I'd say I'm not sure if this was my first one, but it's the first one that I had no idea was Parkinson's related, is temperature regulation. I was just sweating profusely and I couldn't figure out why. And the doctor, the doctor was nearby, and they said, yeah, that's temperature regulation is a part of it. So.
Yeah, and it looks like a lot of people in the poll. And thanks, by the way, for everybody who's participated. We've had 52 of 81 people have participated, and we're getting some interesting patterns, I think. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But Doug.
Hi, everyone. Doug Reed, calling in from Lafayette, Colorado. I was diagnosed in 2010 when I was 36. And in hindsight, I think my earliest non-motor symptom was depression.
Yeah. All right, Kevin, you're up.
Yeah, greetings from Boulder, Colorado. I'm Kevin, and I was diagnosed 14 years ago at the age of 48. Um, that's time to take my meds.
Mhm.
I'm going to actually sort of merge two things. So my earliest non-motor symptom was probably insomnia, which led to me because historically I never slept all that much. But what I was finding was my daytime fatigue was off the charts when that happened. And I'm going to combine it with a little complexity. There was impulse control going on from some of the medications that I was taking. So you can see how all these things tend to overlap.
Yeah, fatigue is another one in the poll that's coming up, that a lot of people are dealing with fatigue, and that obviously relates to sleep impacts and even impulse controls to some extent, because it's just exhausting when you're go 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 on a thing that maybe is impulsive. So yeah, thanks, Kevin. Okay, so I want to introduce Shan Havens, our newest panelist, and we're so glad you're here with us, and you're bringing a beautiful mural behind yourself with you. So thanks for being here. And just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, and what your Parkinson's story is, if you're up for it.
Yeah, despite how it's spelled, man, my camera panning in and out for dramatic effect is automatic, by the way. This is not me trying to make a grand entrance, but
That's a pro move.
Showing off.
I'm actually fairly newly diagnosed. Oh, but despite the way that my last name is spelled, it's actually Havens, my parents tell me. But everyone gets it wrong the first time because it is not spelled like Havens. But it is Shan Havens, and my name is technically Shannon, but I prefer Shan unless I'm at work. And I was diagnosed just a little over a year ago, but I was actively seeking medical assistance with what are now very obvious Parkinson's symptoms for at least 5 years. So I don't even remember what my first non-motor symptom was. Maybe the loss of smell with hallucinations, like smell hallucinations, because I always thought I was smelling natural gas and called the gas company several times. But now I just know if I smell it strong, it's probably not there. So, yeah, and I'm from Idaho Falls, Idaho.
Yeah, so I actually can say that I actually had a similar experience with regards to being apprehensive about some of the things I was smelling. And I purchased multiple, not just CO2, not carbon monoxide monitors, but also just natural gas monitors, because I just thought, if I can't smell it, I don't know if I can smell it all the time. So I've taken that move just to make sure I'm not putting myself or anyone else at risk. So it's risky, some of the things that we have to deal with as far as non-motor symptoms, in addition to our physical symptoms that are more motor oriented. So these results of the poll are very interesting, and I'll comment about them a little bit as we go. The two questions were, which symptoms do you experience, and what specific non-motor symptom would you like to hear more about? And temperature regulation is 20% of the people who responded said that temperature regulation was the thing they'd most like more information about. So does anybody have any insights on the panel about temperature regulation and how you're navigating that, and what challenges it presents for you, and anything along those lines?
I brought some props because this is how I manage it. I learned this from when we were in Spain last year. A woman had these fans that she could put up by her, and they are incredible. So you got to lose sense of pride or whatever in
Vanity.
Vanity. Thank you. Yeah. Because it just doesn't matter. I just don't want to sit there sweat and sweat and sweat. So this helps a lot, or else I have a little hand one. But I think just being active in trying to help it instead of just sitting there and sweating, do something to try to tone it down a little bit helps a bit. and then it becomes less of an issue or an embarrassment on my part, because I get used to that fan stuff. That doesn't embarrass me as much as sitting there wiping away on my brow all the time. So I'd say that's part of it. It's just get the resources to help you take care of that first.
I found that before I had DBS and I was very dyskinetic and dystonic, and all that movement would make me hot and sweaty. But since I've had DBS, I'm not dyskinetic and I don't have dystonia.
That's interesting because I sweated all the way up until DVS. And then after DVS, it all went away. But what's interesting is now, 9 years later, what I'm experiencing now is heat intolerance.
Mhm.
When it's 100 degrees out and I'm even sitting in the shade, my energy just gets sapped.
Yeah, Kevin, I would echo that I'm finding I'm making really conscious choices about how I choose to be outside right now. It's hot all over the country right now. And so I'm really scheduling my days to take care of anything outside in the morning. Because once I'm hot, it takes me a very long time to cool off.
Yeah.
And on the reverse, the same is true if I get cold, right? It's like my feet don't warm up at night until it's morning. And so, I'm trying to anticipate a little bit better and find that comfort zone. But it's a challenge. And I think it's one more thing if we want to maximize how we're doing in each day, planning for that a little bit becomes an issue. So,
Well, and along the same lines with what Kat's saying about getting out there early, one thing that I've discovered is if I get out there early and then it gets hot as I'm out there, I tolerate it a lot better than if I just go out and it's really hot.
Yeah.
So
like
I
if you
find if I
ease
have to
into
work,
it.
yeah,
Activation.
yeah. So like garden work, I'll start at like 7 in the morning, and at 10 when it's really hot, I'm still kind of okay. Whereas if I just walk out at 10, it's like no way.
Mhm. Yeah. Interesting.
One of the things for me with temperature regulation is that my motor symptoms become really dramatic in certain if I'm cold even like a little bit, and it's hard for me to adjust to move through temperature. Like I don't adjust very quickly, so it's I try to be very careful about being bundled up. I'd rather be warm because my other symptoms are more managed, and it's hard for me to get back into a balanced temperature if I get cold.
Yeah. I find that with low blood sugar. I find that with dehydration. I find that with almost any physical stressor, my motor symptoms get more pronounced. And so I spend a lot of time trying to prevent those things, staying hydrated, especially in the heat. Somebody just chimed in about, getting dehydrated. It's so easy to do that. And we don't have accurate thirst regulation in our brains. And so we don't always have an outside cueing that we're thirsty, right? So, it takes attention. So
I find those powder packs at Costco that they have for dehydration help a lot. For some reason, they're easier for me to swallow, maybe because they've got some sugar in them, but I really like, instead of pouring it into a 16-ounce cup, I put it into like a 64-ounce pitcher. So it's much less sugar then, but it helps a lot. I can swallow it easier, and I find that I drink a lot more when I have that.
Yeah, I highly recommend just keeping a water jug or tall glass of water with electrolytes.
yeah.
I think the electrolytes are critical.
Yeah, especially if you're sweating a lot. Something a little salty and a little sweet, right? It's like chicken soup and 7-Up were the universal remedies, right? When we were growing up for the stomach bug, well, ironically, it gave us that balance of things. So yeah. So I hope people feel validated. I'm going to probably start sweating a lot here because I opened up my blinds to have decent light in here. And I'm like, oh, you're going to see me dripping soon. So
When I remember one doctor talking about the temperature regulation and hydration, and she said, it doesn't matter what you drink, just anything to get the hydration. You want to beat that. So, you ideally want to drink the right things, but if you're just dehydrated and somebody wants to give you a soda and you don't like drinking sodas, if it's going to help with the dehydration, take it.
Yeah. I think something that I don't often hear people talk about as far as temperature regulation is concerned is night sweats. But if I think back, night sweats might have actually been my first non-motor symptom. And my doctor actually told me it's not Parkinson's related, but switching to extended release carbidopa levodopa overnight makes me not wake up drenched multiple times. So it is,
Right.
it must be related, but I don't hear people talk about it a lot. And I think that women tend to think, oh, it's hormonal, but it's very much a Parkinson's related situation.
Shan, that's really right on. I was diagnosed in that perimenopausal time, and I just attributed it all to, oh, and I'm a midwife, right? So it's always hormones. So, right? Well, I was wrong. I'm with you. As soon as I started that extended release, my night sweats went away. So,
Well, and like Kat, that women aren't studied. And
we're starting to be.
We're starting to be, but I was diagnosed in perimenopause at like 31 years old. And I said to my doctor, aren't I way, way, way too early for this? And he's like, well, we're not going to call it perimenopause. We'll call it hormonal imbalance. But that cascade of symptoms, followed from that. And temperature regulation was one of them.
The Michael J. Fox Foundation and their Fox Insight, they're actually collecting data on retrospectively, those of us that have been diagnosed with Parkinson's, looking back, what are some of those symptoms that we think now might be Parkinson's related? And it's going to be really fascinating to see what comes forward, because I'm hearing a lot of us say, gosh, before I was diagnosed, there was this and this, and now I'm realizing, like, my pain and dystonia in my back is totally Parkinson's related. It's not, oh, I was leaning over the wrong way delivering babies. It's Parkinson's. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's a nice thing to maybe jump into a little bit of the discussion of pain for a little bit. We did talk about pain not that many sessions ago, but I want to jump into it because it was prominent in the non-motor symptom in the poll, and obviously it's prominent in people's lives. So, I guess there's a question in particular in the chat about all-day back pain and how to navigate that. And Kat, you were just discussing it as maybe dystonia in your neck and back, but anybody have any thoughts about dealing with persistent pain, in particular back pain?
I think you have to rate pain because there's differences between low-grade pain that you just sort of tolerate and it saps you versus acute, level 10 pain, which just stops you in your tracks. So I think there's a difference between how you manage those two types of pain. And different people have different tolerance.
Yeah.
So I think just to say pain is a little too simplistic.
Sure.
Well, I've just been suffering through acute pain. I decided to play pickleball 5 weeks ago, and my career in pickleball lasted 10 minutes because within 10 minutes, I was hobbling off with a broken foot.
Oh.
So that is acute pain. And it's been interesting because I've obviously been wearing a boot and I haven't been exercising. And some of you know that I was, training to ride a bike ride, which is now dipping, away. But it really has brought to focus acute pain from injury, but also the pain from the stiffness from Parkinson's, and it's probably been the longest stretch where I haven't exercised and really feel it. And those things that the stiffness that I used to think was from exercise because I was exercising for so long may in fact be, the motor symptoms and the stiffness from Parkinson's.
Yeah, Larry, that's really interesting. I used to work out with the attitude of no pain, no gain.
Mm.
And in fact, you had to wonder, are you actually really injuring yourself more?
Right.
Well, I was supposed to be missing this particular meetup because on Monday morning I was working out with my personal trainer and I threw my low back out. And it was funny because I said I was doing burpees and I just said, oh, hold on, I think I just tweaked my back. And he's like, you're not lying to me, are you? And I was like, no. And by Monday night, I was sleeping on the living room floor because I was in really bad shape. And so I have on and off back problems all the time, but that was, Larry, to your point, that was acute pain versus kind of this low grade kind of always there. And I get a lot of back pain from different types of dystonia, and I got hip bursitis from dystonia, not from anything else. It's from muscles clenching from dystonia. And so I've mentioned this before, but for me, and this isn't for everyone, dry needling helped.
Yeah.
Robin, when you do dry needling, do you get benefit from the first session?
Yeah, it's not like an acupuncture. When I've gotten dry needling, they have found the exact spot. They put it in and it's like an electric cattle prod through my muscle and it just like immediately releases. I've only ever had one session in each place when I've needed it over the years. I've only ever had one session. And as long as it's a skilled practitioner that knows exactly where they're placing the needle, I've had very good luck with it. And I will say I've heard of people not having good luck with it. So I think it depends on the practitioner that you get.
Well,
And probably the cause too. I
Yes.
think it's one of those things that, chronic pain gets very wearing. Acute pain is completely exhausting as well. And I think we get pain as we age from lots of different places, right? And so it's hard to know where it's coming from, but I think it's important to follow up on if it's impacting your quality of life.
Yeah.
And that may be, for some of us, it may mean, trying medicine or trying different kinds of exercise or trying PT. But it's very impactful, and both acute and chronic pain. And I think it's exhausting. For me, learning to accept a certain level of pain and trying to let my body guide what I do and what I don't do, and accepting that I'm slowing down because of some of this pain and trying to be at peace with that, or changing the amount that I can do.
I'd like to just jump back to it, just to give a couple tips if we can, because I know Robin gave a thought about pain in terms of the deep or the dry
Yes,
needling.
yes. Mm-hmm.
But I guess I wanted to just add that acupuncture came up in that context, and I think acupuncture did certainly help me with some pain early in my diagnosis that I was dealing with, and so acupuncture was good for me. I think the complementary therapies can be very helpful in dealing with pain. It's just going to be a matter of finding the one that works well for you. And I don't know if anybody else has any experience. Massage is another one potentially.
That's the one I was just going to throw out.
Yeah.
With the VA, I didn't know this until I had the acute pain with my back that put me in the wheelchair. But I can, if my doctor writes it up, I can get a massage at home.
And that's, I was going to say, cost can really be prohibitive, but if you go and see somebody, you often can get a certain number of treatments. Brian, did they give you several visits?
Oh, I think it was endless because my pain was so bad because I was wheelchair bound for the 7 months. So
Sure.
Because I know I had about 15 or 20 of them, but they were magnificent. But I also showed my masseuse this thing that I got. I think it was at on Amazon, but it folds in half. I've got it, but I don't want to keep bringing products here. But it's a pad you lay down on, and it's got like a bulky thing in the top of it for the neck and stuff. But it's a massage thing, and I showed that to her, and she thought it was pretty phenomenal, pretty incredible for a little $50 thing to be able to give such a good massage. But it helps a lot because it kind of rolls through things, and it helps. Also, there's, and I haven't done these in a long time, but at this camp that I just went to for adaptive training athletes, there's TENS unit, and then there's a thing that's new to me. I don't know how new it is, but EMS, which is also I'm told it's like the opposite of the TENS unit, but it's muscle stimulation in a sort. And then I was just reading about it last night, and it actually is being used in Parkinson's to help people's tremors. But the big thing that I saw from the government, from NIH website, said it really has to be monitored by a professional. Don't do it yourself, kind of thing. So, but those are things to ask your doctor about. You know, what's an EMS treatment, and how can I get one, and will it help? And TENS units, they prescribe, and you take them home and you put the patches where you need, but those help a lot with pain.
So I feel like pain is one of the things I've struggled to control the most. And I love that both Kevin and Kat said in the chat, like mentioned mindfulness, because not to be that like, have you tried yoga person, but I've always been like a control person, right? It has to be proven and whatever, but I started doing the whole mindfulness and like somatic practices, like just really getting in touch with your body and understanding how to feel your body, which I know sounds like the opposite of pain relief. But it's been the best thing that I've tried so far. I don't take any kind of pain medications, and I'm in a lot of pain, but just being able to do some of those mindfulness practices, that grounding, that really like feeling things through your body does wonders. So, you know, maybe do try yoga.
And right in that same, and this is getting a lot more attention these days, but breath work is also right in there with mindfulness and yoga. And I agree. The more you can kind of put your mind into a place you choose, you're going to be better off.
And this is where I want to make a pitch for agency, because like I have found I had a lifelong yoga practice, and there are certain poses I just can't do anymore because they throw me out of alignment too severely. I'm too flexible. So, and my physical therapist said, with your body type, stop doing yoga. But someone made a comment in the chat, only to the host and panelists, that his pain was made worse by acupuncture and massage. And that's where it's like, take what you like and leave the rest. You know, if you know something doesn't work for you, don't do it. Don't sort of force yourself saying, oh, but this works for them. It's like Parkinson's is such an individual journey, and we have to become experts in our own disease process and what works for us. So what works for one person is not going to work for another person. So you've got to find what works for you.
I think that's back where Kat was saying, right? Thinking about listening to your body. And that's where I had to start that practice of actually hearing my body so I could listen. But if you can listen to your body, you'll find something that feels good to you.
Yeah,
and something that might not have worked years ago might work now, kind of thing, because your mind and your body are both changing, and something that was unacceptable by your body's terms so much changed years later, it could work again.
And accepting it could be the reverse. Like for me with yoga, it doesn't work anymore. Certain stretching does, but yeah.
As I said at the beginning, I went through up to panic attacks with my anxiety, and what brought me back to earth, literally, was mindfulness. And I still, to this day, 12 years later, practice mindfulness 15 minutes a day every morning. And I use a product called Muse. It's a headband that you can put on your head, and it gives you feedback that if you're in a calm state, you hear trickles of water, and then if your mind wanders, you hear crashing waves. So it gives you feedback in the moment. It's been a wonderful product for me to use on a daily basis to effectively deal with my anxiety.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way for us to talk about some of the anxiety pieces, because if you think about how your body reacts to pain, like we want to move away from it, we want to ignore it, we want to, but it makes us breathe faster, it makes us react differently, it makes our muscles tense. And like Shan was saying, sort of leaning into it, at least mentally, thinking about where it's coming from. And for me, trying to normalize it instead of getting worked up because I'm in pain, which then makes the pain worse and it makes me anticipate it more and think about it more. I then become anxious. And there's that whole cycle of now I'm anxious, now I'm not breathing well. And then my thoughts get into that anxious cycle. And I think that's a universal human experience that we're talking about. Now, we're talking about it through the lens of Parkinson's, and we all know we have more of those challenges with Parkinson's. But I think it's been a vital lesson in my journey too, Larry, especially at the beginning, towards that acceptance of not fighting so hard against things because it's not helping my body, it's not helping my mental health. And I think we must normalize that experience in our culture because there's a lot of depression and anxiety out there universally. There's more of it in the Parkinson's community. And so it's more vital for us to grab a hold of some of those things. But I want to normalize. We heard a lot in the survey between anxiety and depression. Those were huge numbers, even in our informal survey today. It's hard. There's help out there, though, and there's even low-cost help. There's help with counselors that can come into you through your computer. You don't even have to leave your house. And you may have access to some of that through your insurance. It's important to think about if you're struggling really with any of the things we just talked about, right? Pain, anxiety, depression. I know we're not getting into some of the other things like I'd love to talk more about like bowel and bladder stuff, those urge incontinence issue, which are also really life-changing and difficult. But anyway, sorry. Somebody else's turn.
No, but I wanted to chime in as we're talking about depression, because I think the one thing we don't do in society and that people don't really understand about depression is most of it is chemical. We're going through brain changes. Our brain is changing. So people are like, oh, you have Parkinson's. Well, of course you're depressed. Your life is changing. No, it's not that. It's the brain's chemistry. It's what's happening inside my brain, that I'm not producing dopamine anymore, which is the thing to help us kind of stay happy and regulated in a positive mood. But so many people, I have a nephew who had a very bad traumatic brain injury, and he lost his ability to participate in sports. And so my brother was saying, well, yeah, he's depressed because he can't do sports anymore. No, he's depressed because he had a traumatic brain injury. His brain has changed. His chemistry has changed.
Right.
If we own it, that it's something beyond our reach, that it's not just a sadness we have of melancholy, but it's actually a chemical reaction or change in the brain, and start looking at it that way, I think more people would be understanding of it.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. But the issue is with it's the people around us who may not. We all here on this panel know it's part of what we live with. But for people outside who are caregivers or families, it's hard for them to get around to understand it's not just Kevin or Dad going through his grouchy phase.
Right.
Exactly.
Doug, you had tried to jump in a couple of minutes ago, and I feel reticent to jump back and ask you to remember what you were going to say, but I don't want to put you on the spot. But did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to say about 2 years ago, I was experiencing lower back pain and stiffness, and I assumed it was because my hamstrings were so tight from exercising all the time. So I was doing a lot of stretching, and that wasn't helping. And I finally got an MRI, and that showed degenerative discs in my L3 to L5. And so it was something completely unrelated to exercise or Parkinson's. But from the standpoint of maintaining overall health, it was important for me. I wound up getting a steroid shot, a cortisone shot, I believe it was, and that helped me significantly.
Yeah, that's really important, an important note, because I think it sort of spins out of what Brian was just saying, that you can't necessarily, if you assume that you understand what's going on, you might be wrong. So, don't be afraid to seek, to look deeply in your own experience, but also seek support from people, and also tests that may be able to shine some light on what's actually going on in your situation. I wanted to try to pivot a little bit to sleep and fatigue, because that was also pretty prominent those two things were pretty prominent in the poll, and I think they're related. So I wonder if we can talk about the sleep disturbances that we experience, and maybe some ways that we try to work around them or through them, and also how that relates to fatigue and managing that if we can.
I think we'd all love an answer. Chris, we're looking to you. Just, like in 2 words or less, the quick fix it. I'm just kidding.
Oh man, I wish it's starting to get worse for me. So I'm actually, I struggle a little bit emotionally with this, actually, because it's really becoming a drag. And I don't want to make you feel bad for making a joke, Kat, because I appreciate you, but
me trying to make a joke, that's about as good as I am at it.
But it's really hard, I mean, I do have some tricks that I use, and sometimes they work well, sometimes they work less well, I mean, it seems like it involves, for me, the timing of my medication dose before I go to bed is important, and also having one ready on the side of the bed, is important too. I try to take a little bit though, so I don't actually make it more complicated with wild dreams that sometimes happen if I take levodopa in the middle of the night. So, I'll take a half tab in the middle of the night to help if I can. So
I have a thing that might help. So it kind of in an offshoot, I found I had low vitamin B, and my doctor was saying, I can give you the vitamin B shots in the office here all the time. He says, or you can get the sublingual vitamin B12 from Costco. And I said, what does sublingual mean? He said, that means it goes under your tongue and it dissolves under your tongue and it gets there faster. So I did, and it worked. But then I found melatonin that I could do the same thing with, because if I just take melatonin, I don't feel a thing. But if I dissolve it under my tongue as I'm trying to sleep, I noticed next morning I woke up, I fell asleep, and it might only be for 5 hours, but I fell asleep just in the process of it dissolving and listening to easygoing music. But I think it's that sublingual gets to the brain faster, mellows out faster. At least for me, that's worked. But then it's when I get up, how do I get back to sleep?
Yeah.
So after that 5 hours, that doesn't work again. So
I work on my breath and mindfulness when I'm having trouble falling asleep. I'll do box breathing. Inhale to the count of 4, hold it for the count of 4, exhale for the count of 4, hold it for the count of 4.
One of the techniques I used years ago when I had that, my early 30s, that was one of my first prominent symptoms with sleep disturbance. I would make an alphabetical gratitude list. And so start with A and just, and there was very rare that I got all the way to Z. And, you get stuck on something like H or J and you're like, there's gotta be something. And then you end up falling asleep. So that's one technique I use.
That's cool.
Somebody mentioned earlier about the agonists, and I think that that's important to think about. I had complete insomnia on some of the higher doses of ropinirole, and that I got a lot done. I was really productive for a few years. But I also, it really was impactful with my sleep, and ultimately I started having some food issues. And once that started, I'm like, we've crossed a line now. So I just think it's worth examining, even though it really helped a lot with my stiffness. It wasn't worth it for me. And once I tapered off of those, it helped. I'm sort of gearing back up. I'm where a lot of you are. It's like it was better for a while, and now I'm coming back into some tougher sleep things. I'm trying to watch how much screens I use. I'm trying to do some of the sleep hygiene things. and I try not to get up and out of bed unless I'm committing to getting up for the day. I find that if I stay long enough and try to relax my body, sometimes I'll listen to a little music, but I don't have my screen on. That helps.
Yeah, I had a tough time with sleep. Talking about my pre-diagnosis, I was an insomniac then, and then went through the whole cycle of sleeping tablets, and it took me years to get off them because I became addicted to them. And it took years to then get through that chapter. But I weaned myself off. I do take melatonin now. Mindfulness is also good. But when I wake up, whenever that is, and it could be any time between 3 and 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, I can't go back to sleep. So I'm up. And then it was great when I was exercising, but boy, the days are real long these days. When I'm up at 4 o'clock and not exercised, it really, you can get a lot done, but it's a bit frustrating for me personally because I haven't been able to get back on the bike. So that's my story with sleep. And then it goes hand in hand with fatigue, because if you haven't got the sleep, you've got the fatigue. So it's a vicious circle at times.
And probably the cognition issues that many of us deal with. I found that when I traveled recently, and I just didn't get to sleep very well. I mean, it was for various reasons, nothing novel in that, but I was just foggy beyond belief, and I couldn't, it wasn't back until I got some better sleep. So those things seem related too.
Yeah.
Well, I want to touch base on fatigue that's unrelated to sleep. I experienced fatigue that was unrelated to sleep, and I found that exercise helped. The rigorous exercise in the morning helped my sleep at night, but it also helped my afternoon fatigue that I would get into. But I have a fatigue reaction to processed foods. And the more processed they are, the more it's like I'm crashing. And I saw someone way earlier in the chat talked about balancing carbs with fat and protein. I really pretty much stick to an anti-inflammatory kind of whole foods type of diet that is very much, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, oils, and nuts kind of based. And I haven't had a lot of problems with fatigue. And it's really funny because we'll travel somewhere and we'll go something, and I can eat in a restaurant just fine. But if I grab gas station food, some bagged or boxed something off of a shelf, I am toast. I mean, I cannot think. I'm like practically catatonic. It's really bad. So that's a fatigue that's unrelated to my sleep. It's my body's having some kind of a reaction to the food.
I also think with a lot of the PD symptoms, with dystonia and with dyskinesias, it's very exhausting physically. I find that I've got fatigue. I'm not sleepy, but I find in the afternoon, I just need to lay flat for a while. And I've tried to accept this and try to learn some things that will keep me engaged or busy or distracted or whatever, even while I'm flat. So I think acceptance of some of that. Pain, somebody chimed in, pain causes fatigue and sleep problems for sure. Pain interrupts our sleep. If we can't roll over, our sleep is interrupted. If anybody's wearing a CPAP or has night terrors or, all of those things are wake us up, right? So I think for me, I'm back to kind of that acceptance and trying not to fight it a lot, but also trying to not withdraw from everything too.
Yeah.
It's a mixed bag.
Yeah, not over.
No, it's really
worry.
interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, not over worry. I found when I couldn't sleep and I get upset about it and I keep trying things, and then the next day I found the more that I put it in my head, the worse it got. And the more that I just said, you know what, I'm not going to be able to sleep now. So I'm going to do something productive, mild, and then I'll take a nap and I'll sleep more. and then the next day I can get better. If I stop fighting it when it's not going to resolve anything, it's kind of that acceptance of, okay, that's not going to work now. But go ahead, Kevin. I'm sorry, you were.
Uh, the thing that Kat mentioned, acceptance and building in things that help you kind of adjust once you've accepted it. I'll give you an example. I just this past weekend went to a black tie gala to fundraise for DPF, and everything was telling me that, Kevin, you don't really need to go out to an all-night party. But what we decided to do was we didn't want to avoid the party. We really wanted to go. So what we ended up doing was booking a room in the hotel. And then what we would do is go up every little while and just chill, just kind of regroup.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be really great because it allowed us to go to the event that we wanted to go and still be able to get through. And we were able to close it down at 11 o'clock, which I thought was way beyond my bedtime.
Okay. I also like to comment on the sleep disturbances on our care partners and spouses. That is also, we've got to take that into consideration. And part of my sleep hygiene is to have my own room ready so that when I wake up at 2-3 o'clock, I don't have to, crawl back and bang my knee on the bed going back to the bedroom and waking up my wife. At least I can, she's not disturbed. And people sometimes, raise their eyebrows when I talk about sleep hygiene and having a separate room. It's okay. It's okay because, it doesn't disturb them. And I think that's important as well to consider, is that it's not just us. We have got our, family and care partners around us who equally, bear the burden and responsibility of this journey with us.
Yeah, it's a great point, Larry.
Yeah, it's especially relevant because of the way that sleep intersects with maybe something that we didn't talk about. And I'm hesitant to bring this up with 8 minutes remaining in our time. But Kat, you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about the sort of urgency surrounding bowel and bladder function. And that's obviously connected in some sense, or to some degree, it's related to, sleep, because you wake up in the middle of the night, you got to go, and there's risks there. You have trouble getting back to sleep there and all that. So maybe we can touch on that for a little bit at the end of our time. And before we do that, I just want to acknowledge something and reiterate that somebody just came through in the chat to the hosts and panelists that there's a chance of a virus effect, which I think the person is meaning to say, and I'd be happy to be wrong about this if I am, or I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong if I am. But I think the point was, if we say we're experiencing something and we start talking about it, someone else might think, oh, I'm going to experience that too. And you might sort of create a problem and then associate it with Parkinson's when maybe it's not, or maybe you might talk your way into sleep disturbances. And I think that that's possible. So I just want to reiterate what Robin said, to say, pay attention to your earlier about, in our conversation, just pay attention to your own experience. Don't think that we have the silver bullet for all the answers. We're just sharing the experiences we have, and hopefully it helps people feel that they're not alone and understand that we're going through similar things. Maybe they're not the same.
Well, and one thing, Chris, before you jump, document how these things are happening to you and then take it to your doctor. Mm-hmm. So, then you can see if it's just a temporary thing or something. But that's the most important thing of all we're sharing, is these all need to be shared with your doctor. But
yeah, great point, Brian. So bladder, bowel, what do we got?
Well, I'll tell you first off, I don't know about the rest of you, but waking up in the middle of the night, if it's because I've got a full bladder, I don't have a lot of time to get from my bed to the bathroom. And like Larry said, bumping my knee or running into the dog on the floor, or, it's a real issue. And it can be the same with bowels, that there's our brains aren't sending messages the way they should. And during the day and at night, it can be a real issue for a lot of people. And I think for me, trying to not put off going, if I'm having any signaling during the day or at night, I do not wait to go find a bathroom. And I think that's where we get into trouble. We're no longer pre-Parkinson's. We're into this Parkinson's journey. And I don't want to have an accident, and I don't, want to wet the bed. I don't, but it's happened. It's happened. All those things have happened. I've had embarrassing moments in public, at my kids' houses, and it's mainly because I wait too long or I don't pay enough attention to the symptoms early enough. I know some people will do like timed emptying. So when they take their medicine, every time they take their medicine, they go in and try to use the bathroom and tune into what their body's telling them. I think it's an embarrassing thing that we don't talk a lot about. And I think it's important that people feel like they can bring it up and or talk to their providers about it. Because it's impactful. It's life impactful.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I think what I'm finding is I don't either get the signal or pay attention to the signal, but then once I know I need to go, it's like if I'm not there in a minute, I'm in big trouble. And that's new and that's embarrassing and that's hard. This is the first time I've talked about it, but it's very genuine, and it's just awkward. And that's what Kat's talking about. I like the idea of either, setting it so you go regularly, or paying attention that, it's been a couple hours, maybe you should go, kind of thing. Because when it gets like where I end up in distress and I'm breathing really hard and trying to focus on the breathing so I can get there, and then I get there and it's just not good.
I think my natural tendency was to drink less water, which we already talked about. Then we start to have the problems with dehydration. So I think the thing to really think about is what can you do, like Kat said, to schedule or to plan ahead or to pay more attention to your body versus not drinking enough water, because it's a dangerous trap between, do I want to not make it to my destination without wetting my pants, or do I want to be dehydrated? And that's not a stay hydrated, just work really hard to make really detailed plans is what I have found, because it's worse the other way.
Yep.
We didn't get a chance to talk about orthostatic hypotension. But one of the things, if you're not drinking enough, your blood pressure bottoms out. And then when you stand, you get that intense dizziness. And so you have to really be careful if you're not hydrated.
That's a really good point. I forgot about that because I had that when I wasn't paying attention to my hydration.
And that can be scary at night too, Kevin. So, getting out of bed quickly to go use the bathroom if you've got orthostatic hypotension. Everyone's sipping their drinks. Good job. Some positive reinforcement for our team here. Good product placement. I noticed that with the DPF cup. But getting out of bed quickly, right? So we've got to slowly get up, get our head above our feet, get settled, but that takes a minute. But meanwhile, you need to go, but you don't want to fall on your face because your blood pressure is tanking. So again, those cueing or even setting an alarm to go get up and go to the bathroom if you notice you're having more of those episodes at night. I know it's a drag. It's a lot of planning and tuning in and but it for me, I'd rather not end up in a hospital with a fractured nose and, our broken leg. No offense, Larry.
That's fine.
Well, and I
I'm not going to start playing pickleball.
I put little motion detection lights on the floor. You can buy for $10, little battery operated things. And they have an amber light, so it won't pop your eyes open, but it guides the path so I can get there and not hurt myself.
Yeah, and someone just typed in a bedpan. That's a great option.
Yeah.
There's also portable potties that you can put next to your bed. I know my dad had Parkinson's, and in his later stages, we put one next to the bed because he had a nighttime fall. So, there's lots of tools. Goodwill has those things. Shower chairs and potty chairs, you can get them super cheap used if you're looking for a good deal, and you can spray them down and get them clean. But
someone also mentioned pelvic floor therapy. And I would say if you have access to any specialist regarding any problem you're having, please ask a specialist, and a pelvic floor specialist is a great idea.
Yes. Yeah, they could do pelvic floor training. Yeah. Fascinating. Good point, Shan.
All right. Well, we're at our hour, so I think we'll wrap up. And thanks everybody for your questions and panelists. Thanks for always for sharing your insights and your experience. Our next meetup is going to be August 15th, and we'll send out all the regular notifications and all that. So you keep your eyes peeled, and we'll see you back here then.